Okay, so have you ever felt like, like the world is kind of out to get you? Well, today we're taking those anxieties to a whole new level,
All right, boy.
diving into your material about the incredible shrinking man. And get this, we're not just talking about the movie itself. You've given us Criterion Collection articles, film analysis by Christian Heinke, Chicago Film Society research.
Oh,
We've even got a Wikipedia entry.
oh, wow. A smorgasbord of shrinking man. Goodness. It's great. And each source adds, a different kind of flavor, right? We've got like production trivia, we've got deep thematic analysis, historical context.
Yeah.
You're in for a treat with this one.
So buckle up because this 1957 flick is like way more than just, some cheesy monster movie, even if it does have that giant spider.
Right.
Where do we even start with all this?
Well, since I know you love those little behind the scenes tidbits,
Oh, yeah.
why don't we start with the special effects?
Okay.
We might chuckle at giant props and rear projection now, but back then, I mean, this was cutting edge stuff.
Yeah. I was checking out that Criterion article.
Yeah.
Giant furniture, oversized sets. It sounds like they really had to get creative.
Yeah.
Did it actually work, though?
That's the thing. It did. And that's largely thanks to the director, Jack Arnold.
Okay.
Remember those scenes of Scott, like, battling, like, household objects, like climbing a mountain of thread?
Oh, man. How could I forget that spider?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So Arnold took those simple effects and he really made them work. The way he used those camera angles, the lighting, he made the everyday seem, massive and terrifying from Scott's perspective. He's shrinking, he's getting smaller and smaller. It's really that visual ingenuity, I think, combined with, a surprisingly grounded approach to the story that elevates the incredible shrinking man above, your average kind of B movie, right?
Yeah.
Above and beyond.
Okay, but everyone keeps saying, like, this film isn't jesty about a shrinking guy.
Right.
What's the deeper meaning here?
Well, you've got to remember the context, right?
Okay.
Heinke's analysis points out that the 1950s, I mean, this was a time of major anxiety, right?
Right.
You had the Cold War going on, the threat of nuclear war, radiation. People were scared
Right.
of things they couldn't see or control.
Right. Unknown, right.
And Scott's shrinking, which was caused by that mysterious radioactive mist, that plays right into those fears, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Hmm?
He becomes a symbol of humanity's, like, vulnerability in the atomic age, right? It's like
Right.
one minute he's a regular guy, and then the next minute he's literally shrinking away.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about unsettling, right?
Yeah, unsettling is right. Speaking of unsettling, our notes mention that the original ending was even darker.
Oh, yeah.
Something about, like, screenwriter Richard Matheson battling with the studio. What was that all about?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other layer of fascinating, behind-the-scenes stuff. So the studio, Universal Pictures,
Right.
they wanted a more, traditional happy ending.
But Matheson's original vision, this is interesting, he had Scott continuing to shrink,
Really?
eventually disappearing into, like, the microscopic world.
Wow. So no heroic last stand against the giant spider.
No. Matheson wanted to leave audiences with a sense of, awe and ambiguity.
Mhm.
In the face of the infinite, he suggests that even the smallest life has meaning, right?
Wow.
It's a powerful message, but, test audiences, they found it too bleak.
Oh, no.
So the studio, they went with a slightly, more hopeful ending.
That's kind of a bummer, but I guess it makes sense.
Mhm.
Still, it makes you think, what if they'd gone with Matheson's original ending?
Right. It might have been even more impactful. Who knows? Maybe it would have been too much for audiences back then to handle.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, get this. The Chicago Film Society research mentions that the guy who directed The Incredible Shrinking Woman, Joel Schumacher,
Right.
also did costumes for Car Wash.
Oh.
Talk about random.
Talk about range. But you know what? It speaks to the lasting legacy of this film, right?
Yeah.
The Incredible Shrinking Man has, think about it. It's inspired sequels, remakes. You've even got a French adaptation. That's a lot of shrinking going on.
So we've got these, groundbreaking special effects. We've got these heavy themes. What is it about The Incredible Shrinking Man that still resonates with audiences today, even if you're not, a diehard sci-fi fan?
That's a great question, because at its core, I think it's about something, we all fear,
Yeah.
right? Losing control, feeling insignificant, facing the unknown. I think Scott Carey's journey is a powerful reminder that those fears, while scary, can also lead to some incredible self-discovery and acceptance.
And sometimes, you had to face a giant spider to get there.
Yeah.
But we're just getting started with this deep dive.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
a lot more to unpack, so don't go shrinking away just yet. We'll be back to explore more about the incredible shrinking man after a quick word from our sponsors.
And we're back, still kind of shrinking our way through The Incredible Shrinking Man. Before we left off, we were talking about, some of the anxieties that the film was getting at, those Cold War fears, that sense of helplessness against, forces beyond our control. It's amazing how those anxieties still kind of resonate with us today, even if we're not, worried about giant radioactive spiders. Yeah, and speaking of anxieties, I think it's impossible to ignore the theme of emasculation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've got Scott here, this, strong, capable guy, literally shrinking away, right? And the Criterion Collection article, I think it does a really good job of like a deep dive on how this reflects some of the anxieties that, men were facing in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Like the changing roles of men and women, the pressure to be the breadwinner.
Right, like all things that defined masculinity at the time were literally like being stripped away from him as he got smaller and smaller.
Exactly.
It's a wild, wild thing to think about.
It is, and Matheson doesn't shy away from showing Scott's vulnerability, right? I mean, he's angry, he's scared, he's really struggling to cope with this, like, loss of control.
And what about, Louise, his wife? She's put in this impossible situation.
Right.
It made me think about how those societal expectations, they impacted women too, right? Because how do you support a partner who's literally disappearing, right before your eyes?
I think it's a testament to both Matheson's writing and, Randy Stewart's performance that Louise isn't just, a helpless damsel. Right? I mean, she's scared, she's frustrated, but she's also incredibly, strong and resourceful. I mean, she loves Scott, but she also has to confront the reality that, she can't fix this.
Absolutely, yeah. And speaking of Matheson's writing, you mentioned earlier that the original ending was even bleaker.
Yeah.
It really makes you appreciate his vision for the story,
Absolutely. That original ending with Scott shrinking into the microscopic world, it wasn't just about shock value, right? It was about confronting the vastness of the universe and, our place within it. It was about accepting the unknown.
It's almost a meditation on, the nature of existence, right?
It is.
And it makes you wonder, what did those 1950s audiences, what did they make of it? Did they see it as pessimistic? Or was there a sense of, awe, even hope? In that final embrace of the infinite.
I mean, that's the beauty of art, right?
Yeah.
It sparks different reactions from different people.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why The Incredible Shrinking Man, even with its, studio mandated ending, it still continues to resonate.
Yeah.
It asks big questions. It explores those, those universal fears that we all have. And it leaves us pondering those themes long after, the credits roll.
So it's not just a cheesy monster movie.
Right.
And it's not just a commentary on, 1950s anxieties. It's a film that speaks to something much, much deeper within us. But hey, speaking of monsters, we can't forget about that iconic spider scene.
Oh, you're right. Even with its, kind of low-tech effects, that scene, it's still terrifying.
Oh, for sure.
Imagine being trapped in your basement with this giant spider stalking you.
Oh, yeah.
It's every homeowner's nightmare.
For sure.
But the way that Arnold uses those, innovative techniques, the forced perspective, the lighting,
right.
You really feel, I think, the spider's size and menace.
Talk about a bad day.
I know, right?
It's incredible how those special effects, I mean, even though they might seem, a little dated now,
sure,
they still hold up so well.
It's a testament to, the power of practical effects.
Right.
And a director who knows how to use them to create, genuine suspense.
Yeah.
But beyond, the thrills and chills.
Right.
I think that spider scene, it also works on this symbolic level, right?
Okay.
It represents that ultimate unknown, that primal fear that Scott has to confront head on.
And conquer. Eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, he does.
Yeah, he did.
It's a reminder that even when we feel, smallest and most vulnerable,
right,
we still have that strength, to face our fears.
And sometimes we find unexpected resilience in the process.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about these deeper themes, the special effects, the anxieties of the era.
Right.
But this is the deep dive.
Yeah.
Right? So let's dive even deeper into the, the details.
Okay, yeah. Let's
one thing that really stood out to me was like how effectively Arnold used those leaps forward in time.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like each jump forward in the story, it's like it marks this like more jarring transition in Scott's size.
Yeah.
And it heightens that sense of like his rapid decline. Like we're constantly aware that time is running out,
Sure.
both for Scott and for like the film
Yeah.
to explore like
Mm.
the full scope of this experience,
Good point.
Yeah, and it keeps the pacing really tight,
Right.
the tension high. And then there's that like striking opening scene with the mist,
Oh,
the
yeah.
way it's shot with Scott almost like dwarfed by the vastness of the ocean and the sky. It's like right from the beginning,
Yeah.
you get this sense of foreboding.
Right. And the Criterion article, it highlights how that scene kind of subtly introduces like the theme of scale and perspective.
Right.
Even before Scott starts shrinking, we're made aware of like, just the immense forces at play, in the natural world.
Yeah, it's like this subtle nod to like how insignificant we are in the grand scheme of things.
Which of course,
And then, of course, he shrinks.
becomes even more prominent as he continues to shrink. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of scale, let's talk about like the film's visual style for a moment.
Okay.
Those scenes where Scott is like navigating like the giant furniture and battling like these household objects.
Yeah.
They take on this almost like surreal, almost nightmarish quality.
Totally. It's like we're seeing the world through his shrinking eyes,
Yeah.
experiencing his disorientation and his fear, like firsthand.
Yeah.
And Arnold uses those everyday objects, a light switch, a water heater.
Yeah, yeah.
And he transforms them into these menacing obstacles. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really a testament to his, his skill as a visual storyteller.
Yeah.
That he can make the familiar seem so strange and unsettling.
Yeah. And then there's that final sequence in the garden where Scott shrinks like beyond the visible.
Yeah.
And it's almost a complete 180 from those earlier scenes with, the giant props and the menacing household objects.
Yeah.
It's almost peaceful.
It is. It's like this complete shift in like tone and visuals, right?
Yeah.
As Scott shrinks, kind of beyond our perception, the film becomes almost like meditative, the focus shifts from like the physical challenges of shrinking to, I think, the philosophical implications of becoming so small that you're practically invisible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think, this powerful moment of acceptance and even transcendence.
It's like the film is saying, okay, we've explored the fear, we've explored the isolation, the loss of control.
Right.
Now let's explore what it means to embrace the unknown, right?
Exactly.
To find meaning in the face of oblivion.
It's a powerful message, and it speaks to, I think, that enduring appeal we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
But as fascinating as all this is, we should probably take a quick pause. We've got a lot more ground to cover, including that, incredible legacy we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
So don't disappear on us just yet.
Okay. I'll stick around.
We'll be right back.
And we're back for like the final part of our incredible Shrinking Man deep dive here.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've covered, let's see, we talked about those groundbreaking special effects, those Cold War anxieties,
Right.
Seeping into like every frame of this film. And we talked about that heart-stopping spider scene. But this movie, it keeps on going, doesn't it?
It really does. It's incredible to think that a film made over 6 decades ago could still feel so, I don't know, so relevant. So now,
Yeah.
Today.
Right. And not just in the, hey, they shrunk a guy kind of way,
Right, exactly.
Like I found myself like connecting with Scott's struggles, even though I'm not, literally shrinking.
Right.
That fear of like becoming insignificant, irrelevant. I don't know. It's almost universal, isn't it?
Absolutely, especially in like today's world, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Social media, information overload.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel like you're constantly shrinking, you know what I mean? In comparison to like everyone else's highlight reels.
Yeah, it's like the incredible Shrinking Man predicted the anxieties of like the digital age almost,
Right.
But what's so fascinating is that the film doesn't just leave us feeling, small and helpless.
Right.
There's a strange sense of like hope too, isn't there?
Yeah, it's in those like final moments, I think, is kind of like embraces the unknown.
Yeah.
He finds, I think, a sense of peace. He finds this connection to something larger than himself.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful reminder that even when we feel, I think, most insignificant, there's still beauty and meaning to be found.
Absolutely. And that message, that ability to find hope in the face of like overwhelming odds, I think that's got to be a big part of why, this film has had such a lasting impact.
Totally.
And speaking of impact, we haven't even really touched on like the film's legacy that much,
Right.
I mean, you can see its influence everywhere, I feel like.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Those are just like the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
But it's not just about, the shrinking itself, right?
Yeah.
It's the themes, the ideas that Matheson put forth, the fear of the unknown, the consequences of like unchecked scientific progress. I mean, these are all like, themes that continue to resonate with filmmakers and audiences alike.
And you can't forget about, those groundbreaking special effects.
Right.
They might look a little, a little quaint now.
Sure.
But back then, I mean, this was revolutionary stuff.
Revolutionary. The way Arnold used forced perspective, oversized sets, those clever camera angles. Right. It was all designed to like put you right there with Scott, as he shrank.
Right.
And it worked. Even today, those scenes still hold up like incredibly well.
They really do. It's a testament to the power of, practical effects.
Totally.
And a director who really understands how to use them.
Yeah.
To create a sense of like wonder and suspense.
Absolutely. Speaking of wonder,
yeah.
One thing I thought was fascinating digging through like the Chicago Film Society research was the context of the film's release.
Oh, okay.
So it premiered in Chicago alongside films like Edge of the City with Sidney Poitier and The Spirit of St. Louis with James Stewart.
Wow.
Imagine that, like a double feature.
Wow.
With like shrinking men and soaring pilots.
That's wild. It's like getting a glimpse into like a time capsule or something.
Oh, no, right.
Seeing what was like capturing people's imaginations back then,
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there was like something in the air that year.
Right.
Something about shrinking and expanding horizons, reflecting like the anxieties, the aspirations of like a changing world.
That's such a great point. It's like a reminder that these films don't exist in a vacuum. Right. Like they're part of this larger cultural conversation shaped by, the events and the anxieties of their time.
And they continued to shape our own understanding of those times, I think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we might watch The Incredible Shrinking Man today and see it as, a classic sci-fi film.
Right.
But it's also like a window into the fears, the hopes, the dreams of like 1957.
It's incredible how like a seemingly simple story about a shrinking man can just like open up all these like different avenues of exploration.
I know.
From special effects to Cold War anxieties to like the very nature of existence itself.
It's a testament, I think, to the power of great storytelling, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Oh, wow.
Into The Incredible Shrinking Man.
That's gone by so fast.
It really has. But we covered a lot of ground.
We did.
We explored, some fascinating themes.
We did.
And hopefully, inspired you listening at home to maybe revisit this classic film with fresh eyes,
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure, by the way, like exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise. This has been a lot of fun.
Good.
And to everyone listening out there, remember, even when the world feels, too big, even when you feel like you're shrinking under all the pressure, there's always something incredible to be found in the details.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.